What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Abdullah coming at you with another video for the channel. And welcome back to the DMV Sports Zone. And then today, guys, I'm coming at you with another video, this time about the Wizards with special guest Chase Hughes, Wizards insider from NBC Sports Washington. Chase, how you doing today, man?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course, of course. And I just want to dive right in. Let's talk about the biggest news this offseason for the Washington Wizards. They signed Bradley Beal to a $250 million supermax extension. What was your initial reaction to that? And do you think the Wizards made the right move with that decision?
Well, I definitely wasn't surprised. I mean, I guess I thought going in that he would maybe get a little bit less than the full supermax. He had kind of floated that idea in an interview with Bleacher Report, and I thought, maybe the Wizards had a little bit of leverage given he was coming off a down year, played only 40 games due to injury. But ultimately, it was a reminder that NBA stars have a lot of leverage in today's NBA, and he got all the money. And I think it was, from the Wizards' perspective, a matter of just a really good player, one of the best players in franchise history, trying to hold on to that and build around him. And in Beal's case, I think it was just too much money to pass up. And also, when you consider the fact that he does like a lot of, the elements of living here and playing for a franchise that has given him a lot of leeway in terms of, being the face of the franchise and a lot of responsibility that he's embraced.
Yeah, I agree. It was definitely something that needed to be done if the Wizards wanted to make some noise in the playoffs. So, what were your thoughts on the selection of rookie Johnny Davis at pick 10, and how would you rate his performance in the Summer League?
Well, I think he falls in line with what the Wizards have been looking for in the draft, which is smart players, guys who were well coached in college and that probably represent high floors, maybe rather than high ceilings. They haven't really taken a chance on a guy over the last 4 years under team president Tommy Shepard, a player who's got all the measurables and the vertical leap, but maybe doesn't have the college production. They continued the track that they've been on and picked a guy who was very productive in college and is probably going to be able to contribute sooner than later. I think defensively, he's going to help them. I do wonder about his 3-point shooting when you're adding him to a team that was last in the NBA and made threes, and he only shot 30% last year. So I think he's going to have to improve his 3-point shot to get a more consistent role in the rotation. But certainly the Wizards have been looking for help behind Bradley Beal for a long time at the backup 2 spot, and maybe he can solve that problem. The Summer League, obviously was not what he was hoping for, or what the Wizards were hoping for. I don't want to make too much of it because it is the Summer League, but I think what it was to me was a reminder that it's probably going to take some time. There's going to be a bit of a learning curve. And after the Summer League, I think my expectations are a little bit more firm that, he's not going to be in the starting lineup right away. For instance, it's probably going to take him over the course of his rookie season to crack the rotation, maybe very similar to what we saw from Corey Kispert, who by the end of the year was showing a lot of promise.
I agree. It's definitely going to take some time for Johnny. Moving on to the point guard room, do you think that the additions of Monte Morris and DeLon Wright have improved this point guard room?
I think so. Spencer Dinwiddie was a really good player on his own, but I don't know if he was the best fit alongside Bradley Beal. I think the Wizards found that out the hard way. Also, he was coming off of a torn ACL, and I think it was a lot to ask to just throw him in the starting lineup. So with Monte Morris, they've got more of a pass-first guy. They've got a better shooter. I think that's going to be really important. Both of those things next to Bradley Beal, because Bradley Beal's efficiency has dropped off in recent years. And if you look at the amount of the percentage of his threes that were assisted early in his career, when he was shooting 40%, a lot more of his threes were assisted by another player. That player, of course, was more often than not John Wall. So I think having a gifted passer next to him, someone who can stretch the floor with the 3-point shot, is going to be really good for Bradley Beal. And I think it's going to be the type of point guard that Wes Unseld Jr. wants running his offense. I really like the DeLon Wright addition. I think that was the best addition they made of the 3 big ones, which were Monte Morris, Will Barton, and DeLon Wright. Because DeLon Wright is a big guard, he's very disruptive defensively, gets a lot of steals, particularly per 36 minutes. He's going to be in a backup role, and he can also shoot. So I think no one addressed their needs better in terms of offseason acquisitions than DeLon Wright.
Yeah, DeLon Wright, I remember in the past, he was always a Wizards killer, just some guy that would definitely ball out when he played us. Going on to Will Barton, do you think he's the favorite to start at small forward position over Avdija and Kispert?
I do think that. A few different reasons. One, he's got the familiarity with Wes Unseld Jr. Secondly, last year there was so much change on the Wizards roster, but the one constant was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was the starting three, right? No matter what happened, even after all the trades, all the injuries, he was always in that spot. And Will Barton's kind of a similar player. Maybe Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is a little bit more accomplished and maybe a little better defensively, while Will Barton has a little bit of a higher ceiling offensively. Maybe I think he can create his own shot a little bit better. He's a better passer than KCP, but there is some overlap. So I think that trust and that prototype that KCP already filled is gonna apply to Will Barton. So I think he's going to be the starting three. But certainly, Denny Abdia, I think, is going to have a chance going into training camp to claim that role. And, we'll see. It's his first full healthy offseason. So if he comes back much improved, then I could definitely see him playing his way into that role. But also, Will Barton is a guy who's been around a long time. He's in a contract year. There's just a lot of reasons why I think he'll be the starting three and probably provide a pretty good boost offensively.
I agree. Also, the Wes Unseld Jr. connection from Denver. Talking about the power forward position, what are your thoughts for Rui Hachimura as he enters his contract year?
Big year for Rui Hachimura. That's, absolutely right. You mentioned the contract year. He improved a lot last season. He only played about half the year, but of course he was the best 3-point shooter on the team, shooting about 45%. Not in great volume, but he did increase his volume. So I think he's got to, continue to scale that upward, even if the percentage goes down. Continue to create off the dribble. All his threes last year were catch and shoot threes. So I think the next step for him is to create his own shot from long range off the dribble, and then defensive consistency. It's going to be interesting. Last year it was fascinating because the Wizards obviously had a rough season and things devolved after they started 10-3. But what was fascinating is that the players on the team told us exactly what went wrong, right? And one of the things they said went wrong was there's a lot of guys in contract years, and it was difficult to sort of develop chemistry that way. They've got a lot of guys in contract years once again. Will Barton, Rui Hachimura, Kyle Kuzma. So I'll be interested to see just how does Rui adapt to that setting and that role, being the second power forward for a full season, because I'm assuming that Kyle Kuzma will start when he's got his financial future on the line. Sometimes it brings out the best in players, like we saw with Otto Porter Jr., for instance, in the final year of his rookie deal, but there's also some pressure involved. So it'll be interesting. I think it'll be very important for Wes Unseld Jr. and the veterans on the team to make sure that sort of no one gets out of line in trying to achieve the team's goals.
Definitely. Now, talking about our main core in Washington, how good do you think Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis, and Kyle Kuzma can be as a trio?
I think they can be really good offensively, at least. I think they can be the nucleus of a top 10 offense. It's going to, of course, depend on Kristaps Porzingis' health. Everyone knows that. Also, Bradley Beal's got to be available. He's missed a lot of games the last few years. So I think having those two guys on the floor, it's going to be extremely important. And then defensively is a question mark, just because, Beal's obviously a much better offensive player than he is defensively. Porzingis blocks shots, but he's not a perfect offensive player or defensive player or a rim protector. He's not Rudy Gobert or something like that. Kuzma, I think, has shown some two-way ability. And then also the three-point shooting, all three of those guys shot below average from three-point range in terms of percentage. So I think in order for them to reach their full potential as a trio, not only do they have to stay healthy, but you got to surround them with a point guard and a three that can ideally defend and make threes, or at least do some combination of those things between the two of them. So I think it's going to be important how they build the lineups around those guys. But in a nutshell, offensively, they can be very good.
Definitely. Moving on to Coach Wes Unseld Jr., how can he improve as a head coach heading into year two?
Well, certainly the defense is always going to be tied to him because he was hired because of his defensive acumen. He did a great job in Denver without, having a Rudy Gobert on the back end or, a Kawhi Leonard in the middle. And he built a top 10 defense. So I think the Wizards are hoping he can do the same thing here, kind of get a lot out of, the personnel that they have. So defensively, they got to be better than they were last year, which was 25th in defensive rating, according to Basketball Reference. Also player development. Some of these young players have to continue to make leaps. That's always going to be attributed to Wes Unseld Jr. That's also a big reason why they brought him in, because of his history developing young players at other stops, including here when he was younger in his coaching days. But also I think that, for him to improve, probably keep the locker room a little bit more cohesive. That was probably very difficult for him to do last year in his first year, but I'm sure he gained a lot of experience from from some of the things that bubbled over. And also, maybe I think for any head coach, just the adjustments moving forward, in-game adjustments, lineup adjustments, maybe having a better feel for just who's hot and, maybe not being quite as scripted with his lineups because you heard some complaints about that, last year during his rookie season as a head coach.
I agree. Hopefully a good year for his sophomore year. And now finally, how do the Wizards stack up against the Eastern Conference? And do you have a record prediction yet?
Well, I think they're going to be better than they were last year, but the Eastern Conference is really good. Last season, they beat the Western Conference in head-to-head records, the first time in years that's happened. I honestly think it's the deepest conference in the East that we've seen since Jordan retired from the Bulls. I mean, it took a winning record just to get in the play-in tournament last year. So I think the Wizards will be better. I think, let's say they win 44 games. And that would be about 10 games more than their over under according to Vegas. So I think they can get into the 40s, if Porzingis stays healthy in particular. But that, might get you a 6 or 7 seed in the East. So I think that would be my prediction right now, kind of a lower seed in the East and mid 40s in terms of wins.
So Chase, do you essentially think that with this super max extension that there's no way the Wizards will ever think about tanking? They're just contending every year?
I don't think that's in the cards anytime soon. I mean, when you sign a guy to that type of deal, it signals your intentions. And I wonder, honestly, if it's going to create some natural urgency to be even more aggressive than they've been in the trade market. Maybe parting with some draft picks to mortgage the future a little bit and try to get some help for Bradley Beal because he is entering his age 29 season. So you can kind of see what your window is. He's probably not going to be in his prime at 39. You'll be lucky if he's in his prime at the end of this contract. So you got, say a 3-4 year window if you want Bradley Beal to be a big part of a winning team to really capitalize on having a very good player, one of the best scorers in the league and one of the best players in franchise history. So I would guess that they are only looking forward and not looking back. And if it doesn't work, then maybe they'll be forced into a rebuild or a tanking. But, as long as they have their first round picks, you don't really need to tank to build through the draft. You just got to make smart draft picks. I mean, look at what the Golden State Warriors have done. Look at what the Memphis Grizzlies have done, the Miami Heat. I mean, those teams have built contenders for the most part without top draft picks. I know John Morant was picked second overall, but that's not the main reason why the Memphis Grizzlies are good. It's because they picked guys like Desmond Bane, 30th overall, and Jordan Poole for the Warriors was 28th overall. You just gotta rely on your scouting and do your due diligence and find draft picks. If you're picking 10th overall, you can find a good player. So certainly the Wizards hope they found one in Johnny Davis.
Yeah, I agree. Lastly, is there any possibility of Donovan Mitchell coming to Washington?
I think there's a possibility just because the Wizards have, reportedly shown interest, but it does seem like it's going to be really tough for anyone to beat the New York Knicks, what they can offer with their draft picks. It's so funny because the Knicks have been, of course, everyone thinks they've been mismanaged so poorly for so long, but they put themselves in a pretty good position to trade for a guy like Donovan Mitchell because they've acquired a bunch of draft capital, including, by the way, they have the Wizards draft pick that was traded along with John Wall to the Rockets for Russell Westbrook. It's been passed around a little bit around the league, but now they have it. So, the Wizards are just a little bit strapped with the protections on that draft pick, which is owned by the Knicks. So it's a bit complicated and messy. So I think assuming the Jazz can get a bunch of first round picks, the Wizards may have trouble competing with that. And also the Knicks have some young players they can offer. So I think at this point, you got to consider them to be the favorites to get Donovan Mitchell.
I agree. Before we head out, Chase, do you want to shout out any of your platforms on social media? I know you were big on Twitter.
Yeah, that would be the one. Just hit me up on Twitter at Chase Hughes MBCS. About a month till training camp, but I'll be continuing to cover the team. And of course, things will ramp up about a month from now.
Well, thank you guys for watching, and thanks again, Chase, for hopping on the DMV Sports Zone. Before we end this video, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe for more DMV Sports content. We try to push out as much fire content out there as possible. Follow us on all social media platforms: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter at DMV Sports Zone. With that being said, we're out. Bye, guys.